I think we'll get started this morning, and welcome to the Chamber's weekly webinar number 7. So we've been happy to present these webinars every week since the middle of March, basically. Topics that will support our members and things that they need to be aware of. As we begin the webinar, please remember to keep your microphone muted and post your questions in the chat box. To get us started, so COVID-19 really changed the way that we live our lives and affected our livelihoods. Congress immediately implemented grant loan programs, and everyone was scrambling to fill out applications for PPP, EIDL, PUA, and all the rest of the alphabet. Today's speakers will take a look at the status of these various programs and others that businesses may still want to take a look at. And we appreciate Terry Lammers and Steve Denny for joining us today with business owners throughout the Midwest on business valuation and transition. They're co-owners of Innovative Business Advisors with offices in O'Fallon, Illinois and O'Fallon, Missouri. And I've got to ask, was that planned that way, that you both O'Fallon? Was that easy for you to remember? Each have extensive helping businesses decrease their value and profitability. They founded IBA in 2018 and served as managing members of a team that helps businesses Wall Street to Main Street. I like that a lot. So I will let Steve and Terry take the ball here, and you guys, thank you again for joining us and for sharing this information with our members.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you very much, Norma. Let me start a screen share here, and we'll dive right in. Can you see my screen okay?
I can see it, yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, welcome everybody. We have got some interesting things to share with you. Amazing what a change in an evening session in Congress will bring. So we've got some really up-to-date information, and you guys may be among the first to begin to hear about this. So we wanted to start with just introducing ourselves, telling you a little bit about Innovative Business Advisors. And Innovative Business Advisors has been focused as a business services firm. And traditionally, we have always thought of ourselves as providing 3 vital services to business owners. First and foremost, helping business owners buy and sell businesses, growing strategically, and then when they're ready to retire and move on to the next portion of their life, help them transfer ownership to either other family members or outsiders for their firm. The other thing that we have provided is business valuation and appraisal services. Those are always very valuable when you're putting capital in play in your business, and also when you're valuing businesses for transfer purposes. The IRS requires that you have those type of services performed as well. And then business coaching services. So these 3 services have really represented the bulk of the services that we've provided over the years. But the week of March 15th in 2020 really changed everything. And it's made a significant change and pivot in our business, as it has with many other businesses. And we were all visited by a new little organism that tended to dominate our lives very, very quickly. So COVID hit our shores. Things began to lock down. Terry and I originally thought that this might be a short-term lockdown. We even affectionately referred to it as kind of a spring break type of process for adults. We really just expected that it was only going to be in place for a couple of weeks. Obviously now we know that things are quite a bit different. So huge impacts that it's had on our world as a whole. And that, of course, brought huge changes with stay-at-home orders taking place, not only throughout our country, but roughly 190 other countries around the globe as well. So we've all had to dramatically reorder our lives, and it's made for changes that I don't think anybody saw coming. One of the things that was real interesting is our Uncle Sam also showed up, and the government actually kind of set aside partisanship. So, previously it was known for its infighting and was making the headline news every day, prominently featuring the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. But amazingly, they came together, saw what was going on, and actually had an incredible impact. And one of the things that was most interesting is they used an approach that had never been tried before. So while in the history of our country and the world, we have lived through pandemics in the past, but the economic impact was really unprecedented this time around. And the way Congress structured the pandemic aid programs is completely different than anything they had ever tried before. So the end of March 27th, they actually passed the CARES Act, and the president signed it into law. And the whole focus on the CARES Act was to focus towards individuals and business owners, particularly small business owners. And for those that may or may not be aware of it, there's about 36 million small businesses throughout the United States. Small businesses represent 99% of all business entities in the United States and roughly 50% of all employment in the United States. So never before have aid programs been targeted specifically towards small business. The CARES Act was incredibly comprehensive as well. It included tax changes regarding filings and self-employment, huge changes to our tax code, created this new loan program called Paycheck Protection Program loans, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. The economic injury disaster loans were existing SBA programs that existed primarily to help organizations through periods of natural disasters like hurricanes and earthquakes and so forth. But Congress expanded that and actually provided a new grants provision in that as well. The express bridge loans were also loan assistance programs that were in place, but Congress modified them extensively to address the particular situation that we found ourselves in. One of the other unprecedented changes was changes to unemployment assistance. So they created two new things throughout the country, nationwide application. First was pandemic unemployment assistance, which allowed independent contractors, those that are self-employed, those that are gig workers, anybody that received income via 1099 for the first time ever to be eligible for unemployment insurance. The second thing they did was they took a novel idea that about half the states were using called short time, which enables an employer to take an employee who is scheduled full-time and actually reduce their time at work into a part-time status. And while they are still an employee, still working part-time, they're also able to draw unemployment assistance. So that's now referred to as short time. And they made that a national prerogative. So significant changes in the unemployment program as well. The other thing they did is via the IRS, they affectionately term these 2020 recovery rebates. In effect, it's an advanced tax credit, and they started mailing checks, $1,200 for every adult, $500 for every dependent. They also made significant changes to retirement fund use and allowed folks that had the ability to access retirement funds without tax penalty to help keep their businesses afloat. And then there were several credit systems that were put in play, the employee retention tax credits and leave credits. And then finally, they made some significant changes to the existing regular SBA loan program. So the most prominent feature of that being, if you took out a new SBA loan, the 7A loans, the express loans, the 504 loans, or the micro loans, the SBA would make the first 6 payments for you on those new loans. So unprecedented level of aid that was put out there specifically for business owners. The thing that's probably gotten the most attention though is the PPP, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I just also wanted to share with the audience here, to get a sense of the $3 trillion that were made up in the CARES Act, the biggest portion of that was for distressed businesses. And then the next biggest portion was for small businesses. I think everybody on the call is probably aware that PPP ended up being reauthorized, what they call round two, and they expanded that to $660 billion that was available for small businesses under the PPP program. And incredibly, there is still approximately $100 billion of that still available. But the application deadline is June 30th. So I would say to you on this call, if you're a business owner and have not taken advantage of the PPP loan, it is something that you strongly may want to consider. And particularly after we share with you the results of last night's Senate vote, there are some adjustments that make it even more advantageous for business owners. I also want to highlight that while the biggest tranche was targeted for distressed business in that $500 billion area, that is what's called the Main Street Lending Program, and that's not out effective in the communities yet, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But as you can see, the CARES Act was pretty comprehensive in terms of the amount of money that was appropriated to help people get through this pandemic. The biggest impact, though, was on the SBA. And I think it's really important to get a sense of what that impact really meant. You know, Terry and I at Innovative Business Advisors have been working closely with the SBA for many years. And a lot of what we do involves SBA financing in one way or the other. So we had a very good relationship with the SBA. And we were fortunate enough to be invited by the SBA to participate very early on in part of the communication of the various aid programs that were available. As a result of that, we started a webinar that happens every Friday afternoon, and our role is to provide information out to the business community to make sure that everybody's well aware of the various aid programs that are available. And the SBA has been incredibly generous in working with us and staying in contact with us each week for the last 12 plus weeks and really keeping us informed about what's going on so that we can share that with a larger audience. So I want to dive into a little bit of the SBA in action just to give the viewers here a real sense of what this has meant. So indulge me for a few minutes as we talk about a normal year for the SBA. And if you look back at 2019, that represented really a normal year for the SBA. In any normal year, the SBA doles out approximately $30 billion in loans. Last year, in 2019, that represented approximately 100,000 loans, and that's about a normal volume. Their primary loan products are the SBA 7A loan and the SBA Express loan, and those two loans make up about 80% of all lending that the SBA does. What I've illustrated here for you is that a 7A loan takes the SBA somewhere between 5 and 10 days to process. Now, when you make application for a 7A, it might take you 30 to 60 days to actually go from the application submission to actually receiving the funds, but the SBA processing time in that is only about 5 to 10 days. On the Express side, the SBA processes those quicker, and they typically get those done in 3 business days. So if you think about the SBA's normal year being about a $30 billion activity level with 100,000 loans, let's contrast that with what's happened under the CARES Act. So again, the Paycheck Protection Program made up the vast majority of the funds that were released, and it's happened in 2 different rounds. And this information, the round 1 information is complete, but the round 2 information is a couple of weeks old now. But in essence, there's been about $520 billion worth of total loans that have happened in round 1 and round 2. And the number of loans is actually up to about 4.4 million loans right now. So when you really take a look at how fast they deployed that, round 1 actually deployed in 14 days, and round 2, this was just the first 12 days of activity. I think it's important when you stack those next to each other and look at what 2019 represented in terms of a normal year for the SBA And then what happened to them with PPP round 1 and round 2, you can see clearly the strain that it put on the SBA. And frankly, it's a pretty amazing task that they've been able to accomplish. When you think about over 26 days, the SBA processed loans that in the past had taken them more than 18 years to process. It's just, to me, watching the SBA and our government in action, it has been amazing to me as a citizen and a taxpayer how much the government has really worked to help us through this pandemic. And I think it's an unprecedented response from the government. So, you know, as a country, obviously we're in a very unusual period that we've never found ourselves in before. You look at this morning, there was just an announcement that another 1.9 million people have filed initial claims for unemployment. That brings the total over 30 million people being unemployed, which represents almost 1 in 4 people within the workforce of the United States. It's really an unprecedented time. I would say that the real silver lining here is that the jobless claims continue to stair-step down, and this graph is now a week old, but it is somewhat heartening that it continues to go down and down. But I think we can all appreciate the fact that it's going to take some time to get through this recovery and get back to a sense of normal again. So with those two things as kind of foundational, let me do a quick overview of the Paycheck Protection Program. Probably many of you on this call have taken out PPP loans or in the process of doing so. So if you'll indulge me, I'll also bring you up to speed on some of the latest changes there as well. So first, the Paycheck Protection Program is a lender-originated loan guaranteed by the SBA, but the lenders do all of the servicing. So the banks, the community banks, and other lending institutions are actually the administrators of these loans, as you may know. It is a loan first and foremost. The very unique feature of the loan is that there is a forgivable portion of the loan, which could be up to 100% of the total proceeds. The loan comes at a 1% simple annual interest rate. There is no prepayment penalty, no recourse, and no loan fees associated with it. And you know, folks, I'm 60, and never in my life has a loan product of these terms been available. So it's really an unprecedented program available for business owners. The original CARES Act made the first 6 months were the payments deferred. The bill that just passed the House several days ago and passed the Senate under unanimous consent last night extends that payment deferral rate up to 10 months. And we'll share a few more of those details as we go along. One of the primary ones being that what was originally a 24-month term for the loan has also been extended for up to 5 years. So that's another provision of the legislation that passed last night. Please keep in mind that while the Senate passed the House bill unanimously last night, it still has to go to the president for his signature to become law. And then once it becomes law, it is retroactive to the signing of the CARES Act. So if you have a PPP loan, you will have the right to go back to your lender and get some of these changes put in place for the particular loan that you have. The other huge change to it is that PPP, under the original legislation, required that you use 75% or more of the funds for payroll expenses, including benefits, in order to apply for forgiveness. They have dropped that threshold down to 60% in this latest amendment. So the latest amendment says that you must use the funds for 60% of the funds for payroll expenses, and payroll does include benefits in that as well. The other interesting thing about the Paycheck Protection Program is while a business owner cannot use it to cover independent contractors, they did allow independent contractors to apply for their own PPP loans to cover the lost income that they would receive. And many independent contractors and self-employed individuals did actually use it that way. The authorized uses included all payroll costs, mortgage interests, rent expenses, and any utility expenses, but all of those things had to be in place by February 15th of 2020. So not unlimited uses, but a pretty good range of uses available for business owners. Got a couple of graphs to give you a sense of where did the money go so far. And it is striking. The Heartland has really taken advantage of this program and really benefited from it. What you see in the darker green are the number of small business owners, and it's the rate per 1,000 businesses so that receive the loan. So a very large proportion of the small business owners throughout the heartland of America have really taken advantage of these programs. And just for another piece of information, it might be interesting to say, well, what percentage of small business does each state represent in terms of total employment? And when you look at this, you can see, in the state of Illinois, somewhere in the mid-40s, small business owners represent somewhere just south of 46% of all employment throughout the state of Illinois. So pretty amazing demographic when you take a good look at these things. Now, what's happened is for us and for the country as a whole, we've all begun focusing on opening back up and a resumption of economic activities. What a welcome respite after a long time of staying inside. So we're very excited to see that, but that's created a whole new set of challenges. For those businesses that were not essential businesses that may have had to close during this period of time, the burden has been incredible. And we as an organization have worked really hard with business owners to really help them cope with the various challenges they faced during that period of time. And, frankly, folks, 99% of what we've done has been without fee or any type of income to us. It's really just a matter of providing information to the field, quality information and good guidance about where you can go to get the assistance that you need. And Terry and I are committed to giving to our community and doing everything we can to help our community not only survive this, but turn around and begin to thrive again. So for us specifically right now, our primary focus is on cash flow, helping business owners really get control of their cash flow, helping them make the key strategic decisions that are necessary to, again, survive throughout this whole post-COVID period and then be in a position where they can begin to thrive again. Cash flow is the lifeblood of the business. And I know that with the business owners on this particular webinar this morning, I don't have to tell you guys what all that means, but it is something that the business just can't survive unless it has some form of cash flow. So we're doing everything we can to help businesses in that area. So significant changes in the PPP now. And I also want to just highlight that that's going to make some real changes in the whole PPP loan forgiveness portion. So there's going to be a lot of questions in this regard. We're seeing basically weekly updates now on all the programs that are available. I was in touch with our senator's office first thing this morning to get copies of the legislation so that we would have the facts in front of us and be able to answer your questions. I also wanted to let the business community on this call this morning know that the whole Main Street lending program is still available. Excuse me one second. It's still available from a funding perspective, but not open for application yet. So it is anticipated that in the next couple of weeks, the Federal Reserve will begin opening the doors on the whole Main Street lending program, which is another series of loans that will be available to business owners. So those things are still to come. We would also like to provide some resources for you guys. There are a number of websites here, in addition to our own YouTube channel, where you can go and watch all the replays on our prior webinars and get some information there as well. And finally, I'm going to give you our contact information if you'd like to reach out to Terry or I and get, have a private conversation and answer some of your particular questions. We are more than willing to do that. And with that, Norma, I am going to turn it back over to you for questions that your audience may have.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any questions from right now. So if anybody has anything, please take advantage of this opportunity to ask. I think that the fact that this new guidance is incredible. I think that, the 100, there's a June 30th deadline on the loans is something everybody needs to be really of. A couple of things that I wanted to mention when you were talking about unemployment and what that looks like across the country, just for everybody's knowledge, in case you weren't aware of it, Effingham County's unemployment rate went from 2.4% in March to 14% in April. Which for employers on the webinar, I mean that's unprecedented. I don't know how many years it's been since we've been at a 14% unemployment rate, because we've all been scrambling for a long time to figure out where we're going to find workers to fill the jobs that are already available. So things have changed a little bit in that regard. But the other thing I wanted to remind everybody is that we do have a COVID-19 resource page site at countychamber.com. We keep all of those. Any new information, when we get the new information on these changes in this new bill, I think it's called the HEROES Act, we'll certainly be having that there for you as well. So thank you to Steve and Terry for some great information.
Hey, Norma.
Yes.
I wanted to jump in here and just kind of maybe add a little bit to the back end of what, Steve was saying about cash flow. We work with so many businesses, and the PPP program, the Payment Protection Program, didn't do a whole lot for helping people with their working capital. That was primarily left to the EIDL loan, Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. That program was administered 100% through the SBA and very quickly became completely bogged down. And although we have seen some money come through that program, it's been very slow. The other thing what we would encourage your members to do, if they're still needing money for working capital needs, is to apply for a regular SBA loan. The lenders right now are I don't know what's going to happen with this new change going from a 2-year, with the PPP going from 2 years to 5 years and all those modifications. But other than that, the lenders that were just completely overwhelmed have had an opportunity to kind of take a breath, and they're able to help you again. So remember, if you applied for a new SBA loan right now to, help with any working capital needs that you have, like Steve said, the first 6 months of that new loan are going to be forgiven. So that could be just a wonderful opportunity to consolidate some debt. Maybe, if you have some interest rates out there that with a higher amount, be thinking about that. So good time to consolidate some debt with an SBA loan.
Right. There was a question that did come up, and the question is on the use of the PPP funds, and they're asking, isn't there a limit that loans under a certain amount do not need to be reported?
So in terms of the existing loans under a certain amount, is that what the question's asking?
It says reporting to the government on the use of PPP funds. Is there a limit that PPP loans under a certain amount do not need to be reported back to the government?
Okay, so you won't really report any of the income that you receive on PPP loans, regardless of how much the income is from the loan. It is a loan product. The one provision, though, is if a portion of your loan is forgiven. So let's say you borrowed a $200,000 and you covered all of your payroll expense with that over the appropriate period, and you were able to get forgiveness for that $200,000 loan because you use that $200,000 to cover all your payroll expense. When you file your taxes for tax year 2020, your payroll expense will be reduced by the amount of forgiveness that you received. So if your total payroll expense for that year, let's say, was $1.2 million, representing your average monthly payroll of $100,000, right? You cannot report the 200,000 of your payroll expense, so you would be reporting $1 million, not the $1.2 million that you experienced, because the federal government, in effect, covered that $200,000 portion. So I think that was the intent of their question, and if not, we'll be happy to answer further clarification.
I don't know if the other side of it was if you don't report anything back to the SBA as far as getting forgiveness, then it is a loan. It stays a loan at 1% interest with they changed the deferment from 6 months to 10 months last night, so you won't have to make any payments on it for 10 months, and then it'll have a 5-year amortization period. So if you wanted to keep the money and use it for other things and not take any of the forgiveness with employee wages, interest, utilities. What am I missing? Wages, interest, utilities.
Lease payments.
Yeah. So those 4 things, then it just reverts to a loan with those terms. So I don't know if Steve's got the right answer, I got the right answer. But like you said, if that didn't answer it, send us an email and we'll get you what you're looking for, or give us a shout.
Okay. The next question is, can you clarify the change that the House and the Senate passed where extends the 8 weeks able to use the funds over the 24 weeks or only pick an 8-week window in that 24 weeks for the forgiveness application?
No, so the change is you have 24 weeks now to use it. So the covered period, what I think the questioner is referring to is the covered period was originally 8 weeks in order to apply for forgiveness. Now that covered period has been extended to 24 weeks, which is effectively through December 31st of 2020. So you'll have the full 24 weeks to use the funds. The other change that they made is you can apply for forgiveness. You have to apply for forgiveness within 10 months after December 31st of 2020. So you can use the funds through December 31st of 2020, and then you've got an additional 10 months to apply for forgiveness on the use of those funds.
Okay, so back to the clarify, what is the process to obtain that forgiveness, such as how will the government verify that conditions for forgiveness were met?
So really interesting. When the application came out, everybody may remember that you really just filled in 3 boxes. You calculated your average payroll, you multiplied that by 2.5, and then you put in the number of employees that you had. Literally the application was 3 boxes. Well, the forgiveness application is actually 11 pages. And there are some schedules that you have to fill out. Norma, we'll share with you the forgiveness application format. So we'll email that to you this morning and you can share it with your audience. But all lenders will be using the same forgiveness application. Now, I will tell you that I would expect within the next week they're going to amend that forgiveness application for the new rules that just passed. Once the president signs it into law, I fully expect that the Department of Treasury and the SBA will be sending out new forgiveness applications, including the new provisions.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Do you have something, Terry?
Yeah, which leads to through this whole process every week, you almost have to take everything we say with an asterisk because it changes quite frequently. So that's why it's really important, to keep on top of these. We do have with Innovative a weekly webinar that is, again, it's free. It's no charge. Go to our website at innovativeba.com. There's a COVID tab, and you can sign up for that weekly webinar.
I will let you. It's fine if you want to. I just want to let you know if you didn't know that.
That weekly webinar that we have on every Friday at 3 p.m. And even just by registering, if you can't make it at 3 p.m. on a Friday, go ahead and register for it because you will be sent a recording of the webinar along with any materials, say like the forgiveness application that we're going to provide to you guys. So very timely information.
Excellent. And yes, that, now right away when it's really very fresh, and people can look at that and take advantage of those new opportunities. So again, thank you. This webinar is also being recorded, as are all our past webinars, and you will be able to, that will be available tomorrow and set with our chamber advocate tomorrow morning. Also, all of our webinars recordings are on the chamber's YouTube channel. So if there's something you want to go back to and re-listen to again, you can sure do that. And just to remind anybody that's on the call, there are evaluation forms that will be sent to you about this webinar. So we hope you'll respond to that. And then next week, I think we've got a pretty good topic for people people want to listen to. But it came up in our HR roundtable last Thursday morning about childcare. And so Holly France, who's the director of the Effingham Child Development Center, Megan Ruers, who's the director of and Courtney Hatcher from Project Child are going to be talking about what's going on with childcare in Effingham County, how the new regulations are affecting that industry right now, and just want to create some awareness for the employers as they're calling people back to work about how the childcare situation is going to continue to be a huge impact on everything else that's already impacting your business. So it'll be at 9 o'clock on June 11th. So be looking for that information and sign up for that. So thank you again to Terry and Steve and to everybody that's on the webinar today. Appreciate the conversation, the information, and have a great day.
God bless you, Norma. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.